Hey, here we go in Ruth 4. And today we're going to go through verses 1 through 6. And if you remember right where we left off, Boaz said he was going to the city gate to talk to the first in line kinsman redeemer in order to redeem Ruth and Naomi. And we start in chapter 4, verse 1. It says, "Now Boaz went to the gate and sat down there, and behold, the redeemer of whom Boaz spoke was passing by. So he said, 'Come over here, friend, sit down.' And he came over and sat down. And then he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, 'Sit down here.' So they sat down." I love this. No time was wasted. He goes right for the city gate. The city gate was where a lot of official transactions took place. Prominent men would sit around. You could call it like the courthouse of today would be the city gate. And I think this is interesting because he is like on a mission. And I just want to clarify something. It's not like Ruth was known as the most beautiful woman in town. She wasn't known for her beauty. In fact, when we look at chapter 3 and it says that he put like the 6 scoops of grain, it's actually 6 measures of grain. And when you look at the weight of 6 measures of grain, it's an 80-pound bag that Boaz sent her of grain back to Naomi. And so I want you just to picture Ruth. You probably picture her this petite, beautiful thing. She throws an 80-pound bag of grain over her shoulder and goes back to Naomi. So let's just reframe this picture of Ruth as this cute, beautiful little thing and think she could be more like, what's the girl in Encanto who's got like the muscles? You know who I'm talking about, right? That's probably Ruth. And I love the fact that he's like, I want her. And I just want to just clarify something that sometimes we look at somebody who desires somebody and it has to be outward beauty. He is after the virtue of this woman. He knows her, the character of who she is. And that is what he keeps talking about as the most beautiful thing about her is what is on the inside. And I just have to clarify because if Boaz is going to be representation of God, that is what is most important to God too, is what is on the inside. So side note, but he goes to the city gate where the esteemed and the honorable men gather. It's kind of like the council chamber. Bringing the 10 men of the elders, that was called a lawful public assembly, and that's to make things official. That's how many people you needed. Now, interesting enough, when he says, "Friend, come over here," when he sees the first kinsman redeemer, when we look at the friend in the Hebrew, it actually means Mr. So-and-so. So it wasn't necessarily a friend, it's Mr. So-and-so. In other words, the story of Ruth, who's writing this, the author of Ruth, doesn't even seem like we should know his name. They leave out his name altogether. Why? Well, we're going to talk about that in this next couple minutes. Perhaps he was unworthy of his name even being listed. Because right in verse 3, he said to the Redeemer, this is Boaz, "Naomi, who has returned from the land of Moab, has to sell the plot of land which belonged to our brother Elimelech. So I thought I would inform you, saying, buy it before those who are sitting here, before the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me so that I may know. For there is no one except for you to redeem it, and I am after you." And he said, "I will redeem it." Of course he will redeem it. Let's just put in thoughts of what is going on right here. Elimelech, the dead husband of Naomi, has a plot of land that has probably been sold a long time ago, and it's able to be redeemed, it's able to be bought again at the price that he sold it for, a decade or so before. It's probably, and you can buy it at that price. So it would be a great deal, a great sum of land. Why wouldn't you buy it? Well, part of being a kinsman redeemer would mean that you would have to take care of the family associated with that land. Well, he's only mentioning Naomi here. Boaz has not said anything about Ruth. So this Mr. So-and-so is thinking, well, I just have this elderly widow who is old, who can't bear children. I can put her up in a little cottage, take care of her, and get this amazing piece of land at this great price. And so, of course, he's saying, yes, I've got it. I want to buy it. But see, Boaz is a little bit sneaky here because then in verse 5, he says, "Then Boaz said, oh, the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you must also acquire Ruth the Moabitess, the widow of the deceased, in order to raise up the name of the deceased on his inheritance." Whoa, okay, let's describe what this actually means. Now, during this time, part of this law of a kinsman redeemer is if there is a widow, of childbearing age, you were responsible for marrying her if you were going to be the kinsman redeemer and buy back the land. And you could have multiple wives at this time, but you were in charge of marrying her, giving birth, like having her have a child. And by the way, that child would then inherit that piece of property that you bought and also be able to partake in the other parts of your inheritance because they are still your child. They are looked at as not only the child of the deceased male, but also your child too. So it's kind of like they got two dads. They had a double blessing. And this was God's way of making sure he took care of the poor and the widows, only because they literally could not own land. They could not own a house. And this was a way a family member could stand in the gap for them to make sure that they were provided for and that the lineage kept going on. It didn't stop at the death of that male heir. Now, how does this really look like? Well, let's think about it in this tense. Like, let's say somebody comes up to you in today's housing market and says, hey, I've got 2,500 square foot house. I'm willing to sell it to you for $100,000. That's what I bought it for 25 years ago. Would you like to buy it? And you're like, yeah, like that's an easy decision. Where do I sign the papers? That's what this guy said. And they said, well, wait a minute. You've got to take care of the first floor tenants because there's first floor tenants. It's a 2-story house. There's a first floor tenants that are there. Will you be willing to take care of them? Well, I mean, okay. I mean, I could take the woman out and I could put her at another house and I'd have all the land that goes with it. Yeah, I could be willing to do that. Oh, well, wait, there's another clause in this. There's also a young widow, and you've got to be able to marry her. And then that child is going to get the house and the property when that child becomes 18. Well, wait a minute. You want me to pay for this house and pay for this property, and then that child's going to eventually get it? Yeah, that's what I mean. Well, wait a minute. Then they're like, wait, that child can also, in your own inheritance of all your own land and your own houses, they can partake into that too when you die. Well, this doesn't seem like a really good deal to this guy anymore. And that's why he's going, no thanks. That is too much for me to sign up for. Verse 6, then the Redeemer said, I cannot redeem it for myself. Otherwise, I would jeopardize my own inheritance. Redeem it for yourself. You may have my right of redemption since I cannot redeem it. He is giving it up. He is passing it up because the cost is too great to him. The cost is too great. He is not willing to pay that cost. He probably had wife and his own children. And he's thinking, man, I'd be taking inheritance away from my own children someday if I have to marry Ruth and have a child with her because they're going to partake in that same inheritance my children have. Now, what this guy gave up, he gave up a place in God's plan. And that is something we're going to be talking about in the devotions to come. But there is a lineage here, the lineage of David, soon to be the lineage of Jesus that comes from Ruth. He is giving up a place in God's plan because he is saying the cost is too high. Mr. So-and-so isn't worth having his name here because he didn't think it was worth it. And that is the lesson for today's devotion. A lot of times we go 2 + 2 = 4, and it just doesn't seem worth it for me. Because we ask the questions, will this fulfill me? How much will it cost me? Am I going to enjoy it? And if the answer is it's going to cost too much, it's not going to fulfill me enough, I'm not going to enjoy it enough, we usually say, I'm going to pass on that plan. When sometimes God's math is totally different. He could say, hey, your 2 + 2 may equal 4 in your world, but it equals 4 million in my world. Sometimes God is going to ask us to do things that we don't always love or enjoy, that may not seem like it's completely fulfilling, and it may seem like it costs us too much. But that is because he sees the future and he knows the blessings to come. God's best may not always line up with what you enjoy the most and what fulfills you the most. And it also may be costly, but I can guarantee it, his best is always truly the best. And sometimes we can write ourselves out of the story of the Lord just because we think the cost is just too high. That's exactly what this guy did. But what is going to happen with Boaz as he now has the right to redeem Ruth and Naomi? Well, that's an exciting story for our next devotion. I hope today you gleaned something off of this devotion, and we just truly love you guys.